I misplaced my coffee. So thank you. I put my coffee someplace else, so let me go get it.
Uh-oh. Oh, shoot. Can't find my cursor. There we go. All right. Click that. All right. So we are about to begin. And with that, I will light the flaming chalice or flickering candle. And here it is. And I'm going to begin with a quote and a poem from Maya Angelou. She said, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Now that could apply to a great many things, but certainly for the nation to bear the story of our history of race untold would be a tragedy and an agony for many. So I think it's an appropriate quote for this morning. The poem I'm going to read is actually an edited version of Still I Rise, one of our most popular poems. So if you want to read the entire poem, you can easily find it online. And it begins, you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may tread me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And with that, we welcome Dr. Angela Taylor. Dr. Taylor is chair of the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees, as I believe you all know. She graduated from UNR with a BA in Business Administration, earned first a master's degree in Public Administration and Policy, and a PhD in Educational Leadership. So she has the most extraordinary qualifications, perhaps of any previous member of that board. She's also president and CEO of Guardian Quest, which provides training, organizational development, and leadership solutions for corporate, government, educational, and military clients across North America. She's the founder and CEO of Excel Quest Community Development Corporation, which assists nonprofit organizations in improving their compliance with anti-discrimination laws, enhance their diversity, and increase performance and efficiency. She's also an ordained pastor, serving as assistant pastor at Greater Light Christian Center in Reno. So she brings a very unique and highly qualified, authoritative voice to this very important contemporary controversy on how we should teach race in our public schools. Dr. Taylor, welcome, and thank you very much for being here this morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murphy. I appreciate you being here. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. What an honor to be here. I see a lot of cameras off. You're supposed to be Zoom ready. Zoom ready at 9 a.m. It's one thing to be on Zoom, right? And it's something else to be Zoom ready. Leah's doing her, getting herself. I see it, Leah. That's good. That's good. Just one. Yep. There you go. There you go. Julie, I see you popped on this morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. And I will say this: Happy Black History Month. What a great month to do this in. And thank you. Thank you again for being interested in this conversation. As many of you know, this has been a national conversation about teaching on race, issues of race, race relations, the history of race in our country. And it has gained a lot of steam of late, so to speak, right? For various reasons. And I guess I don't know if we all ever really know what all the reasons are, but it has gained a lot of steam of late. And I think it's really important to begin to have the conversation. Should we even be talking about race? Right? Should we even be talking about race in school? Is that important? And I think an important piece of the conversation is, how do we talk about race in school? And so my understanding is I'm gonna talk with you for about 20, 30 minutes or so. And then I want to make sure we leave ample time for questions, because there are a lot of questions on this issue. And one of the things, excuse me, I want to say is this. I recognize that we don't have a lot of conversations about race, right? In our country, we just don't have a lot of conversations about race. It's uncomfortable, right? Although we know that race is such a significant part of our past as a nation. And by the way, I believe America, with all of our faults, right? This is still the best country in the world. I've had a chance to travel to several other countries. I'm blessed by that. But I always bring two really important things. Of course, my passport, right? And then the second thing is a round trip ticket, right? Because I'm coming home. I'm coming home, and I've been to Africa a couple of times. I've been to Mexico. I mean, just a few places. Many of you have traveled a lot, but I'm always coming back. I do believe this is the greatest country in the world, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have a conversation about this country and how we got to be who we are and where we are. I mean, we understand that there are some things in our country in the past of our great nation that really have, maybe we didn't quite all the way live up to all of those principles that have made us who we are. And there are times in our country and in our nation, and we know that when we didn't do such a great job of that. It doesn't mean I hate my country. It doesn't mean it's bad if we talk about our country. It doesn't mean that we're anti-American. We want to live somewhere else. We want to, tear down the government. It doesn't mean we hate the military. It doesn't mean any of that, right? Any of that. What it means is that, you know what? We've got to talk about where we've been, because, man, there's some of those places we don't want to go again. Would you agree? I mean, yeah, thank you. And thank you for nodding. As he said, I'm an assistant pastor at the church. And I bring you greetings. Good morning, by the way, from Greater Light Christian Center on Keystone and 7th from my senior pastor, who gave me a pass today, so to speak, so I can be, he gave me a pass. He gave me a pass today, so I can be here and share with you. But I mean, they're just so thank you for nodding. As this one I was going to say, I don't know if you're aware, but in the Black church, we're kind of interactive, right? We're so get yourself some coffee, get a little something, get yourself some coffee, whatever you need. But reactions are fine. Comments in the chat are fine. Some head nods and those kinds of things are fine. And you can, hey, if an amen slips out, that's going to be okay by me, right? I just want us to have a great conversation. And again, I know this is one of those things that and my mom is here, sitting here with me, and she's saying good morning to the baby. But look, hi, good morning, precious. But I want you to feel comfortable having the conversation and really just feel great about the fact that now no one's as comfortable. I'm looking at you, Peter. Nobody's as comfortable as you, man. That lady, look. But I want you to feel comfortable asking questions. I really do. There is no question that is going to offend me. Oh, that's disrespectful. Oh, I can't believe she said. I can't believe he didn't know at all, because we don't get chances to talk about this. So this is a great chance to talk about it, right? To talk about it and ask those things. This is where you're supposed to ask what you don't know, right? This is where you're supposed to ask maybe things you've never heard of before, or things that you've heard of that maybe don't feel quite right, and so on. So all that's okay. So we're gonna ask. But feel free to ask. It's a respectful forum. The fact that you've asked me to come and share with you and have this conversation means that it's something that you're really interested in, and you know that it's important. So I wanted to just hopefully give you a place to exhale, to feel comfortable, and to know that yes, you can ask a question, whether you put it in the chat, and I don't care if you turn your mic off and raise your hand, and then we can have a conversation. That's okay too, right? That's okay too. So everybody good to go? Yeah. I got some thumbs up. Okay, got some real thumbs up. I like it. All right, I am going to go ahead and share my slides. as we jump into this, I see our optimize. All right, here we go. Great. Participants can now see my application. All right. You can see, everybody can see everything, correct? Yeah? Yeah. All right, good. All right, so let's talk. I mean, I just wanted to start really at the very beginning, right? Why do we even want to get something out of the way on one screen over here to another one? Okay, awesome. You know, why do we want to talk about race? Why even do that? I mean, there's several good reasons, in my opinion, right, to talk about race. I mean, first of all, as you know, as we said, right, it's our history. It's our history. As I talked about, this is a part of our story as a country. And I love the Maya Angelou quote, right? The Dr. Maya Angelou quote that it's nothing, I mean, I'm not going to say it exactly because I don't know it exactly, but I love that quote that, man, if we can't have a story untold. And this is a told story. These are the lived experiences of people in our country. Right, and some were oppressed and some were oppressors. It doesn't mean we hit people over the head because of it. We know it was hundreds of years ago, but the thing we don't want to do is ignore some of those things that we know we don't want to repeat. It is it's our nation. It's the history of our nation. We need to have an understanding. Even children today, as we talk about doing this in the school system, right? K-12 is what we're talking about. Why? Because we want kids to understand. Right, we don't want to repeat things. This is Black History Month, so I've really been having a great time going to some of the schools and reading books on different inventions and discoveries of people in Black history. I think part of because we have such a concern. We've had such a concern about people in our country and the travesties and the bad part for hundreds of years that have happened, that we've just pretty much just not included anything historically. I think that's one of the reasons that African Americans have contributed. That's why we have Black History Month, so that we make sure we pay special attention to that, because Black history is our history, right? Kids love to hear, this is what the American Pediatric Psychological Association say. Kids love to hear that bad things happen, but then people change. And the same thing about our country. Some bad things happen, but our country changed, right? Certainly there's still plenty of work to do. Don't get me wrong now. I certainly understand that. But it's okay to tell kids that some of the opposition to teaching and talking even about race and the racial history of our country and race relations and so on is that then kids, are you going to teach kids to hate our country? No. I know that information and I don't hate our country. I know plenty of Black people that know the information and don't hate our country. I know plenty of white people that know that information, don't hate our country. I know plenty of Hispanic. We can go on and on and on. Plenty of us know the history, know the story, but we don't hate our country. But the further and further we get away from it, if we don't continue to talk about it, it's so easy to fall into some of those same patterns. And this is what research shows us. Multicultural education is important for white students too. And this, I don't know that AKA, that was supposed to be another comment. I'll get that to you in just a second. It's important for white students too. Research shows us, which is what that last bullet should be saying. Research shows us that everybody benefits when we talk about race, when we talk about multicultural issues and conversations, when we have these conversations, whether it's in kindergarten, yes, even as there's research that shows that students, even as young as kindergartens, begin to show some tendencies and preferences around race, around ethnicity, right? I don't know if you remember, but there was a study done in the 1950s with little girls, little white girls and little Black girls, and we call it the doll study, right? And they showed these little girls dolls, some white dolls, some Black dolls, and they asked these little girls which dolls were beautiful. All the white girls chose the white dolls, and the majority of the Black girls chose the white dolls. I mean, that says something. Right, that's enough of a reason, in my opinion, to talk about race. Because we want everybody to see themselves in what it is that we do, what we teach, because that's the world that we live in. And by the way, it was done in the 50s and people started saying, well, that was so long ago, it isn't relevant anymore. It was repeated in 2010 with remarkably similar results. That's a really good reason to talk about race. Because we want all these little girls to see them, to look in the mirror and see themselves as beautiful, to see their mom as beautiful, to see their sisters as beautiful, not just them, see others as beautiful as well. But when you don't see yourself as beautiful, imagine what that does to your head, to your psyche, right? To your development, to your self-esteem. and how else that shows up along the way. So it's not that we should talk about race. We must talk about race because all students benefit. We want people to be able to see beauty in everybody. It's always going to be in the eye of the beholder, absolutely. But we want people to not judge beauty because of someone's skin is darker or lighter, or their eyes look like this, or their hair is like that, or whatever the case may be, right? Look at some of those other things where it doesn't just disqualify you. That's a really great way to put it. Thank you. That's really good way to. We don't want race to be a disqualifier when it comes down to what's beautiful and what isn't, who's beautiful and who isn't. I don't know about you, but I can't think of a better reason to talk about race. Let's see. I see some questions. Is it possible for me to remove the gray bar on the slide screen? Is there a gray bar? You have a gray bar on the screen? Someone talk to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it too.
Where is it? Where's the gray bar?
At the top. There we go.
Okay.
Oh, now we can see your title.
Now it's at the bottom.
Oh, you know what? You know what? That's my chat box. That's why. It's like that's my. Okay, let me move it. I didn't know you guys could see that. How about that?
That's better.
Better? I'm sorry. That's my other screen. You're not supposed to see that. That's my other screen.
Hi, Kevin.
All right. Is that better now?
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm so glad I went to read the chat box. Okay, let's see. Let me ask you, can you see anything? Can you see the chat box, my chat box?
Yeah, it's on the right-hand side of your screen now.
All right, so I'll bring it back over here. Now you can't see it, correct?
Right.
All right, good. I'll keep it over here. Thank you. I didn't know about that. All right, so let's go. Thank you for putting that question in. And if that happens, just turn your mic off and just say, "Oh, excuse me, it's okay." I'll get going and start talking, and I'll miss all that. And you guys are missing some important stuff. So, all right, let me keep moving. So yes, that's the question. How do we deal with even respect those white parents who worry about making their children feel guilty, yet still convey the worst dimensions of our nation's racial history? It's a really good question. I think hopefully what we're able to do in the schools when we talk about race is that, it's not something that you just decide, hey, I'm just going to talk about it. I think it's important to prepare yourself for that as a teacher, as an instructor, right? When I go into schools and I read a Black history book, right? Like I just read about George Crumb, who invented the potato chip, right? And I was in the 3rd grade class, so obviously they found it interesting. And so we talked about it, and there was there's just some interaction between a Black chef and a white patron, and yada yada. It's a great story and so on. But you tell a story and you talk about it in such a way that these are things that happen, but you don't stay there. I think it's critically important that we don't stay there. I think it's going to come up later on the slide, but since this question came up now, I'll mention it. I stole this from another pastor who was talking about something totally unrelated to this, but it applies here. We have to talk about what's strong in our country, and we also have to talk about what was wrong in our country. If we just talk about the wrong, then yes, kids can feel guilty, but we also have to talk about the strong. And I think you balance it that way. So so part of the in terms of respectful standpoint is, hey, it's important that we learn this information, but it shouldn't be done in a play where there's some finger pointing, where there's these are things that happened in our past. These are things that our ancestors did. And thank God, as a nation, we changed some rules, we changed some laws, so now everybody gets to vote. We got rid of slavery. I mean, so you follow it up, say they don't just learn that. They learn this stuff too. And you balance it with both sides. I mean, that's how you deal with it respectfully. I hope that answers your question. If not, jump back in and we're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later as well. I think it's important to teach and discuss comprehensive history. The problem is which point of view is used. Oh, I see. Which point of view is used to talk about the facts and occurrences. So we need to discuss the situations which occurred from both points of view, I think. How can that be done in the view of the current state of textbooks and other teaching aids? Really good question, and I think it's absolutely right. Here's the whole thing, and this might be my bias, of course. I think that if you try to talk about it, not from I try to talk about it. Hey, here are the facts, right? And we all have perspectives. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's important when you talk, if from an educator standpoint, again, I put myself in a position when I go into classrooms a lot anyway, but especially, not a lot, but this month I go a lot. I go a lot in February and talk about this stuff a lot. You do it in the way as I described it. is, yeah, there are some things that happened. Yes, absolutely. It was horrible. And I'm so glad as a country, we made some better decisions. Yes, we still have some work to do. Yeah, there's still some challenges. I think you talk about it factually. I gotta try to take my, and clearly, clearly, I was impacted more than a whole lot of students I'm talking to historically, right? But I can't deny the fact that, at some point, thank God, our country said we have to make some changes. Hopefully we continue to do that because there's still some work that needs to be done. But I'm remiss if I don't acknowledge, thank God, that the situation changed, and otherwise I'd be in a very different situation than I am now. So I think that the thing that you really try to do is here are the facts, and there's some horrific facts out there. Like, how do you talk about the Tulsa massacre that most people just learned about last year because it was the anniversary? You don't deny it. You talk about it, and man, there's some horrible things. These are the kinds of things that we have to make sure don't happen again. Let's talk about it. This is what was. Families had to have conversations with children if they allowed their children to see that. But I don't think shielding your child, their children. I'm just going to say it this way: shielding your child from some of the bad is not what protects your child. It allows your child to live in the false reality. And the reality is that, man, there's some bad parts of our history, but there's also some good parts of our history. And you really try to challenge yourself to tell both sides of it, if you will. And hopefully that's not one point of view versus another. Hopefully there's not another point of view that there's, to me, slavery was bad. I don't know if there is another point of view on that, right? But there's some atrocities that came along with it. And that's the reality of it. And you talk about what we did to get ourselves away from that, why that still isn't happening today. That brings some light into it. I believe it's important, and that maybe because I'm optimistic to a fault, but you leave people at a place of hope. Because we're at a place of hope, right? We're a little challenged in that sometimes right now, honestly, in our nation. But overall, we're at a place of hope. And I think we're remiss if we don't tell that part of the story as well. Hopefully that helped. The AKK, Robin, the AKK was a typo. That the AKK was supposed to be a statement that said research shows that all students benefit when you talk about multicultural, when you talk about diversity, when you talk about the accomplishments of a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. So you didn't really miss anything. And yeah, there can be deep differences between what's taught by the teacher and what is learned, what is taught by the teacher and what is learned by the students. What is it you want your students to learn? Oh, as a whole, we want our students to learn the truth. We want them to learn the facts, but that isn't just true on racial history, by the way, right? That's true, period. I mean, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's all the perspectives, not the perspectives, all the cultures and the people who have contributed to our country. We want our curriculum, right, to this. Thank you, because this is a great segue to my next slide. We want our curriculum to be such that everybody, all of our students can see themselves in it. That's not just true for race, it's true for race, but it's true for women, it's true for Hispanics, it's true for, think about if you have cerebral palsy and you have a textbook and Stephen Hawking is in it. You know how much that's gonna really inspire a child dealing with that disease? Everybody should see themselves. So what we want our students to learn is this is what happened in our history. And not just in our history. We have the science and geography and advances and inventions and discoveries in medicine. And we want our students to see themselves. And I think part of what the country had in mind, right? I'm trying to change my slide now. I won't change. There we go. Is well, not our country, but our state. We're going to talk a little bit about some state laws. Assembly Bill 261 that was passed this past session talked about how important it is for history and the to have a multicultural perspective on the history and contributions that others have also made to science, to the arts, and to humanities of certain groups of people, right? Not just one group of people, but that it needs to be expanded to include all groups of people. And then it also prohibits the State Board of Education, or what we call the NDE, from selecting material for use for public schools that doesn't adequately support the contributions of marginalized groups. Marginalized groups are groups that are on the margins, right? Those who are underrepresented, and so on. Although in our school district in Washoe County, we're a majority minority district, meaning the majority of our students are people of color, if you put them all together. right? Most people don't know that. That's who the generation is coming up behind us. The majority of our students are students of color. So all the more reason that, wow, we have to really diversify, right, our teaching. And not that we don't teach science and geography and humanities and arts and all of that, but we have to be a little bit more inclusive, and textbooks historically have not. And that's state law. State law before then, it was Senate Bill 234. Some still call it was 234, was changed to 235. Some still call it 234. That's why I put it this way. It was passed in 2015. And we have something called the Nevada Academic Content Standards, and they require that educators complete a multicultural education course prior to their initial licensing. Because if you are a teacher and you're in a traditional educational, you have a traditional educational learning experience, curriculum in college and so on, you may not have had a multicultural class. So you know what, if you think about a community like Reno, when we aren't getting more diverse, but we aren't very diverse, and then you say you go to school at the University of Nevada, go Pack, right? All of that, then maybe you may not be that accustomed to interacting a lot with people that are not like you. So then there should be some curriculum in that. Let's help you. Nothing wrong with that. That's why we have an equity and diversity department. How do we help teachers deal with students who are different, parents who are different, families who are different? Because you have different cultural norms, you have different ways that you behave, different values based upon your upbringing and your culture. Not right, not wrong, just different. Gosh, I gotta learn about that. I'm not gonna learn what every family's background and culture and so on is, but what I am gonna learn is that they're different, and it's okay that they're different. So how do we meet someplace in the middle? Because you'd be hard pressed to find a family in any kind of group that doesn't want their child to do well at school. And so that's why that's important for teachers to have that kind of certification. And then also that the standards for social studies include multicultural education. This is going to come up again. This is a part of the Nevada Academic Content Standards as well. So in terms of, should we be talking about race? We've got to talk about race. It's state law. Okay, it's state law. I see some more questions, but I'm going to go on a little bit further to finish this piece on state law because there's a little bit more to it. Okay, there are 26 total states who have recently passed laws. Not unfortunately in the direction that ours have done, and we did a little bit more last year with the first bill 261. Texas and Oklahoma are two that bring your attention, but they're actually 20 of them that are there are 13 that have passed them already, 20 more that are considering doing some work. This is pretty much first the Texas bill was 30. Sorry, what a bad typo. I'm sorry. The Texas bill was 3979, and the Senate bill was Senate Bill 3. Teachers may not be compelled to talk about widely debated, and these are in quotes, widely debated and currently controversial issue of public policy or social affairs. Who can tell me was that just passed last year? Who can tell me what that was in response to? Put it in the chat. If you think about probably the most talked about recent issue in terms of race relations in our country. Somebody, if you put something in the chat. Oh, come on. George Floyd. It was about George Floyd. It's been about the shootings and that. That's what it's been about. It's okay. You can be wrong in that. Remember, this is where we got to talk about it, y'all. This is where we get to practice. It was about that. It's about that. It prohibits teachers from, if it's widely debated or if it's controversial issue, any current event like that, teachers may not talk about it, which is what the bill prohibited. It started with a House bill. As a House bill that was passed very quickly, and then when Senate Bill 3 came along, they made it even tighter. Oklahoma, House Bill 1775. I thought that number was interesting. There we are, Kevin. Police relations with minority communities. Thank you. I just see that popped up. It's highly controversial. It's a highly controversial law, and it really evoked fears when the legislature passed it earlier this year. From some who worried about that it would have a chilling effect on classroom discussions. In other words, what the bill said was some of the same type of information. It forbid K-12 schools. Let's see, here's my notes here. Here's what it forbid K-12 schools from teaching that one race is superior to another. Don't think you should have needed the law for that, but okay. It also blocks schools from teaching that a person is inherently racist or oppressive, and I'll tell you where these came from, or that students should feel guilty or anguish for past actions of their race or of their sex, gender, let's say that. Nine other states have passed laws like this. Arizona's was overturned by their Supreme Court. None of these, because the big question, the big topic of concern right now is a phrase, a topic, I don't even know what to call it in this context, called critical race theory, or CRT. Right? I mean, that's a myth. I'm sure many of you have heard of conversations around that. Critical race theory. We don't want to teach critical race theory. We don't want to teach CRT. Interestingly enough, none of these bills that have been passed, 9 have been passed, except one was overturned, but there are 20 more who are considering them. Many of them, none of them specifically mention critical race theory. They use the kind of language as we just read. None of them specifically mention. Most of them ban any discussion or training or any kind of orientation that the U.S. is inherently racist, or any discussion of anything like unconscious bias or conscious behavior, privilege, discrimination. Many of them prohibit conversations about any of those things. And these are just things that are a part of our country, right? It's a part of our history. How the heck do we make sure we don't repeat these things, that we understand them, understand how oppressive it is, understand how it holds people back, and doesn't allow people to fully participate in the American dream? And we need everybody. We are a country. We need the contributions of everybody to make our country as good as our country can be. But a lot of it prohibits the conversation on things like that. And some have even denounced teaching and concepts that are associated around critical race theory. Oh, I love this. Yes, one way to balance discussion is to talk about many white groups who were part of Martin Luther King's call and went to the South on freedom rides. And so one of the things that I've done in classes in my occupation actually is we'll show the I Have a Dream speech, and we'll focus on how many people in the crowd were white. Mm-hmm. Most people don't even, it's 250,000 people. There were many in the crowd that were white. People forget about that or don't even really understand that. There were some children, there were people that were older. There was a lot more than that. People, 250,000 people, and there were many that were white. We got there together. We got there together from the very, very, very beginning. Okay, let's go on. Let's talk a little bit more now. Let's go deep. I want to dive into critical race theory. How did we get there? I don't know if you can see that green light. I'll read it if you can. Critical race theory, or CRT. We got there because there are fears that CRT will admonish that all white people are oppressors, right? That while classifying, and then at the same time classifies all Black people as hopelessly oppressed. So some of the fears around critical race theory say it indoctrinates our kids because it teaches all white kids that they're bad, all Black kids that they're good. And then what about my child? My child is multiracial. So they just one parent bad and one parent good. These are just some of the conversations around it. And the fears have spurred, as we just talked about, some boards and state legislatures to ban teaching about race at all or racism in schools, right? More recently, CRT, or critical race theory, has been used for challenge it's been a catch-all phrase. It's been a catch-all phrase for things like multicultural education, diversity, equity, social emotional learning. It's just been any of that people have kind of pushed in the CRT. It's very interesting in the conversation. I was actually asked one time, will you denounce the teaching of CRT? And my response was, if there was an agreement around what CRT was, we could have a conversation regarding that. But the challenge is that CRT, critical race theory, has become a catch-all. That means multicultural, that means diversity, that means equity, it means these things and even some more. And so when you say a broad statement like that, it's pretty difficult to land in a place, because if you say something like that, and then you say, hey, that we're gonna have some multicultural education as Black History Month, for an example, or we're just gonna have multicultural education, right? Because people from different cultures have contributed to our class. Aha, that's CRT. So it puts teachers in a really difficult position we're not gonna, it's, what are the things that we teach that we don't want to teach? Of course you don't want to teach that one race is better than another race, any race. Of course you don't want to teach that any race is inherently oppressors, and any other race is inherently victims of that oppression. Of course you don't want to teach anything like that. Absolutely not. But that is not what CRT is. Okay, CRT. Let me give you some facts about critical race theory. Critical race theory is a theoretical framework that's taught at the university level. CRT is not in K-12. In fact, most of the time it's at the graduate level. The central idea behind CRT is it doesn't really attribute racism as much to all white people as individuals, but it really focuses, and not even as an entire group, by the way, what it really focuses, it focuses on systems and policies and procedures and rules in our country that have racism embedded in them. Things around the criminal justice system, and you look at the statistics that show that when you have, for an example, a Black or brown suspect or criminal or someone who's committed a crime, right, versus someone who is white. Let's say you have a Black male versus a white male. They have a similar criminal history. They commit the same crime. The Black male gets 2.5 more times the sentence than the white male. That's just those are just facts, right? So obviously we need to take a look at our criminal justice system, right? So that everyone is treated right in a similar way. So criminal CRT says we gotta look at stuff like that. Things in housing and things in healthcare and who gets what kind of care and you look at back in the day when you had redlining and even in our own country, I mean our own state, there's a little community just what's that going north of 395. I just was involved in a panel discussion about this called Black Springs. Well, way back in the day, that was the only place where Black people were allowed to buy land here in Reno. And it's kind of out there on septic tanks. They don't have the utilities and so on. So if your family bought land out there versus someone who, let's just say you're a white family. I have a friend of mine, she and I talk about this all the time. My family wasn't here when that was going on. We came towards the end of that, but nonetheless, but her family was allowed to buy land, just say in central Reno. I mean, the way those properties have appreciated in value significantly different. Sets her family up very different than set up the families of those who are in Black Springs. So critical race theory looks at stuff like that. But even so, understanding what critical race theory is, it's important for me as a trustee because that's part of the conversation. But critical race theory that's a theory, that's a theoretical framework, and it's really, when you get into that, it's really much more. That's a very simplified way of talking about it, by the way. But that's university level stuff. It's not in K-12. It doesn't belong in K-12. And when people talk about it being in K-12, that's because they're pulling in things that have to do with things in our history, multicultural, things about looking at contribution of others, think about looking at some of the behaviors and the laws that we had, and think about slavery. Slavery obviously is a law that wasn't a great law. We can talk about stuff like that. That's what we should be doing in K-12, right? That's not critical race theory, but that's where all of this comes from. It becomes an umbrella where all the other stuff fits in. Let me give you a little bit more about critical race theory. This woman, she's one of the founders of critical race theory. So I think if we want to know what critical race theory is, this is a really good place to start. Let's go to the people that established, that founded, that created the theoretical framework of critical race theory. This is Kimberly Crenshaw. She's a founding critical race theorist, and she's a professor of law at Columbia. She's a professor at Columbia Law. And this is what she says: overall, the concept of critical race theory is being misrepresented. It's a discipline that seeks to understand how racism has shaped our laws and how these laws have contributed to the impact of people of color. And critical race theory is not what's being taught in the K-12 curriculum. This is one of the founders of critical race theory. So I think it's important for us to understand, okay, we got to get this. Maybe it's not quite as it's being represented to be. And I think that's really important to know. I'm going to pause here for a couple of questions. Let's see. You talked about that. That was a good comment, Dr. Kevin. How will you know when your students learn what you want them to learn? Science of success in the students. Is that just for, I'm not sure, you mean just overall for us as, I'm going to need a little bit more on that, Bob, to really jump into that. What was our topic today to be? Was our topic today to be the teaching about slavery? I don't think I understand that either, Bob. Was our topic today to be teaching about slavery? No, it's about talking about race in schools. That's the topic today. And we're talking about teaching about race in schools. So you got to give me a little bit more, Bob. I want to answer you, but you're going to have to give me a little bit more. Well, that was a direct message. How would you know when you got to give me a little bit more, Bob? I'm not sure where you're going with this, my friend. All right, let's jump a little bit more into CRT, and this is kind of how we got into this conversation about race in schools. What CRT is not. Critical race theory has been inaccurately defined as diversity education. Diversity education is simply learning about differences, right? We like to say, hey, why should we learn about differences? We should be colorblind. It's impossible to be colorblind. Why? Because we're human. You can't help but see the fact that when I jump on the screen up, that's an African-American female. You see, because you see my picture, you see who I am. I can't help to see who you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's not a thing wrong. The diversity is what makes us strong, because you're going to have a perspective that I could never have, because your lived experiences, your background, your religious views, your religious views, your political beliefs, it gives you a whole different perspective than I have, right? Because they're all different. Whether we're all black or white or whatever, we have still different, because our lived experiences are different. Man, when we put those things together and say, now let's work together to come up with something that we can say, hey, we can all live with this. That's the best answer. There's no way in the world I have the best answer to everything. There's no way in the world any of you have the best answer to everything. But man, we put ourselves together. That's why it's important to talk about diversity. Differences matter, and in a good way. So we don't want to be colorblind. We don't want to teach our kids to be colorblind. We don't want a colorblind society, because the fact of the matter is that cannot happen. And by the way, when you're colorblind, when you say, Angie, when I see you, I don't see color. You know what that tells me? There's a part of me that you don't see. I want you to see all of me, right? Not because I don't want you to judge me by it, but I certainly want you to see all of me, because that's all of what I bring. And guess what? I want to see all of you. Okay? It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It can be turned into a bad thing, but anything can be turned into a bad thing. But diversity is a good thing. So yeah, critical race theory is not, diversity is not a part of critical race theory. Equity is not a part of critical race theory. Equity is ensuring that each student has the same opportunity to get successful outcomes. People have also begun to misdefine equity as, it means everyone has the same outcome. That's not true. Equity says everyone has the same opportunity for great outcomes. I can't make a child go to class or do their homework, whatever the case may be, but I certainly want to give you the same opportunity. Here's a great example. People think about equity in terms of race, but they don't think about equity in terms of special education. Special education is an equity program. We want children who need a little extra help because they have a disability to get the extra help so they can still have great outcomes. Special education is an equity program. Gifted and talented program is an equity program. We want to give those gifted and talented kids what they need, and they need different things than our kids who are in the general population, because we want them to have the great outcomes for them. We want kids to be able to achieve the best they can. That's an equity program. English language learners, we used to call it ESL back when I was in school 100 years ago. The people that don't know English, when they come over here, it's not the child's fault, right? So they get to go to public school. So guess what? We need to teach them the language, but they need a little extra help. We can't take a kid who, whether it's Spanish, whether we have a pretty decent Chinese speaking population as well, whatever language it may be, we can't say, we're going to throw you in the first grade, ninth grade, whatever. We're not going to teach you the language. Just figure it out. Of course, we're going to teach you the language, but it takes a little bit extra, because we still want this kid's in our country now. So we want to educate them. Right? We're not involved in their immigration. Schools don't do all that. That's not what we do, right? You show up, we're a public school, you show up, we teach you. That's the way it is. And if you need some extra help, we give you that. That's what equity is. It doesn't take from anybody and give to anybody else. It doesn't say we're going to hold you back until everybody gets the same. That's not what equity is. Equity is everybody gets what they need so that they can achieve the best academic results that they can. And different kids bring different things and have different needs. And as a public school system, we have to address those needs. That's what equity is. It's not CRT. Social emotional learning. This is a recent thing that has been described as, that's critical race theory. It is not critical race theory. Social emotional learning is the process of developing the self-awareness, self-control, and interpersonal skills that are vital for school, work, and life success. It has to do with taking responsibility for the decisions that you make. It has to do with making the right decisions. I've seen this play out in a kindergarten class in a fantastic, fascinating way. I saw a teacher in the kindergarten class. They were working on a little project. It was really good. They had little sticks and they were doing things and making little projects and so on. One child was kind of having a little bit of a meltdown, which, it's kindergarten. And, the teacher called the child's name. I don't remember his name. Cute little redhead kid, though. I'm just going to say it was Brian, but I don't believe it was Brian. Brian, I want you to think about the decision that you're making to a kindergartner. And then Brian sat back Kind of put his head down and thought about it. And he kind of put his head back up and he was all better. And that, I can tell that wasn't the first time she'd asked him to think about those decisions. That's a good thing. That has nothing to do with race. Every child, every adult needs to learn self-control, self-awareness, and better interpersonal skills. Are you kidding me? And there's research that backs up when you implement SEL or social emotional learning, you have better participation in the classroom. You have fewer absenteeism and discipline issues in the classroom. And at the end of the day, you end up with better academic results. And that's really what we want. It's the best academic results for kids that we can get. That's not CRT. That's helping to manage the classroom, and it's helping the child learn some really good life skills that he or she will need as they become more and more productive parts of our society. So it's a little frustrating that all these really important things, I mean, research shows that diversity education is important, right? I just explained how that is and how we realize that. You're learning about diversity. We talked about equity, have to have equity. We cannot give every child the exact same tools and expect them to have the same opportunity to be successful. Okay? These are important parts of the educational process. And so they should not be under the umbrella of CRT. The multicultural education refers to any kind of form of education of teaching that incorporates the histories or the texts or the issues or the values or the stories of perspectives of people from different cultural backgrounds. That's an important part of our country, important part of who we are. And as I said, you think about it, if you are a student and you look up and you see somebody that looks like you, that acts like you, that has your, like I said, Stephen Hawking, a woman, whomever the case may be, man, that inspires you. That inspires you. Let me get going. I see I've got about 4 more slides and I got to get going. All right. Restorative practices. Restorative practices is a different way of looking at discipline. You still get discipline, but it's in such a way that it restores good behavior. We educators recognize that if a student should be disciplined, that they should be suspended. Why reward a child who shows bad behavior? Now you get 3 days off. You get to stay at home and play video games. Oh, no. Whole different approach. This is what restorative practice is. It's you work together with the person who was wrong, right? And the person who did the wrong how do you work this out? You learn a different way of working through things. The research shows that gets better results as well, and it keeps the child in school. All right, so most people agree that it's important to talk about race in schools, that it must be taught, that's important, but nobody wants it done in a way that is accusatory. It should be age appropriate. Yes, it's uncomfortable sometimes, right? Oh, here it is. But you want to ensure that it's done in an inclusive way, in a respectful way, in an inspirational way for all students. You don't want students to leave feeling guilty about anything, right? But we need to learn, we need to be educated about everything in that age and grade appropriately, right? And then you always come back to a place, as I always say, that we're still all in this together. Okay, all in this together. All right, now okay, good. My other slides I had a couple extra slides in here. Okay, great. So now let's go back to this. Bob, you don't way back in, so I still don't know I'd love to answer your questions. So I need you to just give me a little bit more. Was that topic today about teaching about slavery? Nope, it wasn't. Also, sports opportunities for all genders. Yeah, I mean, I think same thing with opportunities. Absolutely, I think that's especially the beginning of Title IX. That's what Title IX was all about, is having equitable opportunities for girls in sports. So certainly that's an important piece as well. Okay, now it's time to have some questions. Are there other questions that we haven't? I got a little friendly reminder for time for questions. We're at that point, so that's great. Up to a new message. I sent the question quite a while ago. I think you missed it. Okay, I'm sorry, Lily. I'll go back and look for it. Oh, agree completely with your suggestion on how to cover slavery, Jim Crow, etc., by showing how far we've come. But how then do you address George Floyd and all the current horrific racist travesties that are in the daily news? I mean, those are really tough conversations, Lily. And the thing that I've learned, I'm gonna run out of time, so it was a little video I was gonna show you. It's about 5 minutes, but we've had some great questions, and I'm glad to have answered them along the way. One of the things that we've learned is when we don't address some of the current events, it's hard for children. It's hard for students because it's so on the news. right? It's so in everything. And when something like a George Floyd happens, or some of the other travesties that we see, when there isn't a safe place to talk about it, right? It's hard for children. Children end up where they don't understand. And so what we're learning is that as much as we can, we try to give some resources to parents to help their children. How do you have these conversations with them, right? You ask them. One is you got to give. Let me give you two different perspectives. One is, if let's say if there's a George Floyd, or there's a shooting that appears to be an unfair shooting of, say, a young African-American male, and I use that for obvious reasons because we've had those things in our country, right? You have to, if you think about, so if you're an African-American male or female, that's going to hit you a little bit closer, just because you're thinking, man, that's my brother, that's my dad, that's my uncle, that could be us. And so you want to give them a safe place to talk about it. And I think you talk about it in such a way that you recognize, hey, these are things, sometimes people do bad things because we know they do bad things. I think we want to really be careful. Let's say in a shooting situation like that, all cops aren't bad. And you don't want to put them in that kind of a context, because as much as we can, we don't want people to fear law enforcement. I'm one of those. I think we need law enforcement, right? And the vast majority of law enforcement officers are good. So I think a conversation around, even in these positions that we have, sometimes people still do bad things. They do bad things. And let's talk about how that bad thing played itself out, right? But understanding that there's so many more people that didn't make that bad decision, whether that was George Floyd. There are plenty of travesties that go on. Having a conversation about how we treat people with respect, how, yes, that was the acknowledging it. Yes, well, yes, it did. That's to it. That was horrible. That's horrible. It may even be a side conversation with the child who may be particularly impacted or moved by that. And I think in an overall standpoint, age appropriately though, right? Because you'll have a different conversation, say if it's a third grade class versus if it's a ninth grade class, or if it's a third grade, might even be too young depending upon the situation, a fifth grade class, let's say, or a ninth grade or 10th grade class. But having a conversation around it and how you can support each other around it. And George Floyd, that's part of the conversation, but you also had a great crowd of people standing aside. That was a diverse crowd that was like, hey, we want to stand up. How do you stand up? How do you support in a situation like that? And then when something like that's bad that happens, right? How do you stand together to help each other through it? I mean, those are tough conversations. And some of the laws that I mentioned to you really, and because they're so tough, kind of prohibits that conversation from happening. And I think it's important to be able to have those conversations, especially at home, but they also certainly come up at school as well, because teachers have to deal with the impact, especially when it's something so big like George Floyd was. So hopefully that helps. There, I see a couple other questions. Let's see. Back when I was teaching, there were restrictions on what we could address on the LGBT issues. Still there? I think, good question, Jeff. I think that the restrictions, I don't know what those restrictions are, but most of the things pertaining to sex and sexuality are covered in our shared curriculum. That's our sex ed curriculum, bottom line, for the state. And it's actually, it's a required that you include more than just your traditional, right? Are very traditional from our country, male, female, mother, father. But so there are more areas, more areas that you can talk about, because obviously, you have people in classes, really has two dads or two moms or whatever the case may be. The really important thing that we encourage is as you share information, right, that you do it in such a way that you aren't putting judgment one way or another, or putting value one way or another. Right? That's important, because you don't want, you have students who identify as transgender, for an example, right? A third of the students nationally that identify as transgender attempt suicide. A third, that's a huge number. It's a huge number. So you certainly want to do it in a way that doesn't put a value statement on this is good, this is bad. You don't judge it, this is good, this is bad. It's like, hey, this is what we have. We have people who this is how they interact, like this. It may be different. People have their values. You should get your values at home. Schools don't teach you values. I understand that. I agree with that, quite frankly. But you can't ignore the population. Again, everybody needs to see themselves in the population. I think it's important. It's a safety thing as well. But we have people who are trained to do that. People who are trained to teach the share curriculum because of things like that. It's another hot topic. Teaching is hard these days, man. Teaching is hard. My feeling is that, let's see, Kevin, speaking of current news, how would you parse the recent Whoopi Goldberg controversy? You know, that was really interesting. I was actually, my office is in my house. I was working from home. But I was having a little mid-morning break. So I just turned on the view and I actually heard the comment. And I found it really interesting to say it wasn't about race. I think the mistake that she made early on was not considering the Jewish people race from a really traditional kind of old school way of looking at race, if you will. And of course, that's not true. I think that, and I think when she came back and apologized, I don't think she's racist or anything like that. I just think she was wrong. Quite honestly, I just think she was wrong. If you look at her historically, she's been very supportive of the Jewish people, and I just think she was wrong. Bottom line, that's how I parse it. Bottom line, she was wrong. My feeling is that currently there is discussion about what existed in the way of racial atrocities, but was not that was not discussed in the past. Similarly, women's contributions were ignored or attributed to men. So it is important to put out the comprehensive and accurate facts. Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, because there's more conversation that needs to have. We need to tell the truth about it, right? And there's some horrific parts of the story. Yes, there are. But the coolest thing, and I keep going back to that, is as a nation, we didn't stay there. And I think that should be a part of the conversation. And I think we should be careful, right? Certainly as educators, when you're in the class, and I'm not in the classroom teaching very often, right? Be careful. You don't want kids to leave feeling guilty because of something that somebody that looked like them did 300-400 years ago. Of course not. But you also want them to be educated about it, so we then get back there and we recognize, man, as a country, yeah, we made some bad decisions, right? And we made some better decisions, and we still have some more decisions to make. That's the true story. That's the true story. And it should be accurate, whether it's race, whether it's gender, all of those things. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Just want to say thank you for spending that's very sweet, Leah. I'm in Carson, so not under Washoe County School District, but these same issues, yes, they are. Yes, they are. Hi, Kathleen. How would you rate the current Washoe County School District curriculum in terms of teaching diversity, including race? Is a revision desirable or being considered? Funny you should mention that, Kathleen. There is in the Nevada Academic Content Standards, it actually requires that we teach some curriculum on multicultural, as I said, on multicultural education. And so there is a task force now. There's a lot of drama around, a lot of our social studies curriculum comes from a company called Benchmark. Very well respected, and so when they do social studies curriculum. So when when it was like, hey, you know what, we need to do these updates to the curriculum as required by law. Part of that was you bring in some social justice, multicultural. You saw the tenets, I showed them to you. And so they sent in, oh, we have a supplement. You already use our curriculum, you've already purchased it. Here's supplemental materials that can help teachers, integrate this into their social studies curriculum. They sent it was called the Benchmark curriculum, very, very controversial. Did a community/parent survey. About 300 people or so responded to the survey, and the vast majority said, nope, we don't like it, we don't like it, we don't like it. And so was it community-wide? No, because it's such a low percentage rate. But for those who responded, vast majority said, no, we don't like it. I, by the way, when I got a chance to look at it, right, happened to agree. Right? You know what? It's a little too much for us. Okay, so what the superintendent recommended was that, you know what, the Nevada Academic Content Standard, i.e. Nevada state law, requires that we have some teaching on this. We do some supplemental instruction on this, right? We've been talking about why that stuff is important. Okay, great. Let's put a committee together, a committee together of our stakeholders in our community to decide what should that look like, right? You got, because no matter whether you're doing all of these things, you have to see what works best for your community. You have to see that, right? So let's put a group together. So she put a task force together. The task force was selected blindly, by people, by a diverse group of people. And so they're doing the work and they're reviewing the curriculum. They're doing K-5 right now. And then after they do K-5, they're going to do 6-12. So it is in need of taking a look at from that standpoint. And the first step of that is happening right now. Just like sentencing, I hope that answered that question.
Well, Dr. Taylor, I think we're at the end of our hour, or just a little bit over. And so,
all right, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. I think there's a great deal of enthusiasm in the audience, as you can see, and I think we would really treasure the opportunity to continue this conversation about race. So I hope you will come back. I hope you will bring other minority voices with you, and maybe you can give us some help with that. And obviously, this is an appropriate discussion for Black History Month, but we don't want it to be confined to February. We'd like this to continue throughout the year. So I hope you'll help us continue this conversation. This has been very enlightening, and thank you very, very much.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Bob, you didn't come back and ask your question, sir, so I'm sorry if I left you hanging. I'm happy to answer, but I couldn't quite follow you. But I appreciate the interest in the conversation. Happy to come back at some time when you're looking further. I mean, I think this stuff it's important stuff to talk about, and I don't shy away from talking about it because I think it's really important. Let's get the accurate information out there. Let's get the truth out there as we work to do the best job we can for our students. I think educating our community is a big part of it. So thank you for your interest and for taking the step to have this. That took courage as well.
Good. Thank you again. And
thank you so
much. We have another Sunday forum coming up on, I think it's the 20th in 2 weeks. And since we weren't able to coax our speaker into that slot, I'm going to step in and give us all an update on COVID-19. So if you're sick of hearing of COVID-19, just stay away from the next Sunday forum. All right. All right. Thank you again, Dr. Taylor.